A piercing scream tore through the peaceful ambiance of a New York autumn evening. Instantly, reflexively, his head snapped toward the sound. From the window of the restaurant where he sat, a column of thick black smoke billowed up from the building opposite. And then, like a ferocious beast, a vibrant orange-red blaze licked through a shattered glass window, consuming everything in its path. Without a second thought, the man shot up from his seat, his chair clattering over behind him. Leaving his half-eaten dinner, he bolted outside, his heart pounding in his chest, a rhythm painfully familiar. He saw a small crowd beginning to gather, panicked, and then, amidst the chaotic shouts, he heard a faint, desperate cry for help from within. He charged in, heedless of the shattered glass and the searing heat that licked at his face, searching through the dense smoke. He found a man trying to crawl out, coughing violently, his face smudged with soot. Without hesitation, he threw an arm around the victim, using all his strength to drag him away from the inferno that threatened to engulf them both. Mere seconds after they escaped, a loud explosion roared, and the entire ground floor of the building was consumed by flames. The man who had just charged into the inferno was Michael Mike O'Connell, a name once synonymous with bravery and sacrifice at the New York City Fire Department, Engine 33 Manhattan. Mike wasn't a native New Yorker. He hailed from a small town in Montana, where majestic mountains and vast skies had forged a young man with a courageous heart and an iron will. His father had also been a volunteer firefighter, and stories of bravery, of rescuing people from peril, had deeply ingrained themselves in Mike's soul since he was a boy. He remembered cold winter nights when his father would return home, smelling of smoke but with eyes sparkling with pride. It was those memories that spurred him to leave his hometown, to come to this city that never sleeps to follow his heart's calling, to don the dark blue uniform, the heavy helmet, and face the fire dragon, as his father used to call it. Mike, at 42, still maintained the toned physique of someone who exercised regularly, though his salt and pepper hair was streaked with a few silver strands at the temples. His eyes were a deep sea blue, often thoughtful but also very determined. He wasn't a man of many words, but his actions always exuded decisiveness and boundless compassion. His former colleagues used to jokingly call him the O'Connell Wall because of his steadfastness and reliability in every dangerous situation. But that wall, however strong, had once suffered cracks, wounds that time had not yet completely erased. Now, standing amidst the chaotic crowd, drenched in sweat, soot clinging to his face and clothes, the instincts of a retired firefighter surged stronger than ever. He was no longer an ordinary diner. He was Firefighter Mike again, ready to face danger. He checked on the man he had just rescued, trying to keep the victim conscious until paramedics arrived. His own breath was still ragged, not just from the exertion, but also from a chillingly familiar sensation creeping into his mind, a memory he had tried so hard to bury. The chaotic scene before him now, the man being attended to by paramedics, smoke still clinging to his hair and clothes, was like a knife twisting deep into a memory Mike had desperately tried to lock away for 5 long years. He was no longer on the bustling sidewalk of Manhattan. His mind was violently pulled back to that fateful night. A December winter night in Brooklyn, snow falling relentlessly, the cold seeping into every fiber of his being, yet incomparable to the coldness of the loss that was about to strike. Warehouse 17, an old derelict building in a long-abandoned industrial zone, was now roaring in a sea of flames. The fire wasn't just dancing orange-red spots. It was a true monster, consuming everything, growling and spewing columns of thick, black smoke into the gray night sky. Mike's voice, narrating, deep, resonant, interspersed with the whistling wind of memory, the sound of fire, and distant screams. Engine 33, respond. Level 5 fire at Warehouse 17, West Side Abandoned Industrial. Initial reports indicate possible entrapment. Repeat, possible entrapment. Captain Miller's voice over the radio, though distorted by static, was clear and firm, etched deeply in Mike's mind. He was Lieutenant O'Connell then, leading an attack team, known for his calmness and decisiveness. Beside him was Danny Sullivan, a young man barely in his 20s, his eyes shining with the fiery enthusiasm of a rookie, yet unable to hide his anxiety facing such a massive blaze for the first time. Mike had clapped him on the shoulder, a reassuring gesture. "Just do what you were trained for, Danny. Stick with me." When their truck screeched to a halt about 50 yards from the warehouse, the heat was already scorching their faces. The hiss of the fire, the crackling of debris, the screeching of twisting metal, the gush of water from colleagues' hoses outside battering the burning walls. They were ordered to enter through a side door on the east, where the building's structure seemed more intact. Mike led the way, Danny close behind, with two other teammates. The black smoke was so thick that the helmet lamps seemed useless, creating only a dim, eerie halo in front of them. They had to crawl close to the cold concrete floor, trying to find any scarce fresh air. The acrid smell of smoke, burning plastic, heated metal, a deadly concoction assaulted their nostrils, even through their oxygen masks. Mike's voice, narrating, more urgent, recreating the tension. "Second floor!" Intel said the victim might be on the second floor. Watchman's office. They found the metal staircase, still relatively stable. Carefully, step by step, they ascended. The heat on the second floor was even more horrific. Sparks flew like deadly fireworks. Mike signaled, splitting the team into two smaller groups for a faster search. He and Danny were one. "Danny, check the left sector. See anything?" He yelled over the noise, but only received Danny's head shake through the smoke. They called out. They listened, hoping for a faint response amidst the roar of death. And then they found him, a middle-aged man in a security guard's uniform, lying unconscious near a shattered window. He had probably tried to escape but collapsed from smoke inhalation. "Found him!" Mike yelled, trying to be heard above the fire. "Danny, help me! We need to get him out now." Danny, though his face was pale with stress and lack of oxygen, quickly complied. Together, they lifted the man. Mike went first to clear the path, while Danny and the other remaining teammates supported the victim. They were trying to make their way back to the stairs, hope and urgency surging in their chests. Just a little further. But fate was cruel. When they were just a few meters from the staircase, a horrifying cracking sound echoed from above, from the ceiling groaning under the heat. Mike looked up, a premonition of doom running down his spine. Then a roar tore through the air, louder than anything they had ever heard. The roof, a massive slab of concrete and steel, ablaze, came crashing down. Soundscape, a terrifying explosion, a violent collapse, the shriek of colliding metal, Danny's and others' terrified screams, then Mike's desperate yell. Mike's voice, narrating, voice breaking, full of pain and regret. "Danny! Watch out!" He only had time to scream. Then on reflex, he lunged, trying to push Danny and the worker out of the danger zone. But it was too late. The section of the roof collapsed right where Danny and the victim they were trying to save were. He felt the immense weight crushing him, the searing heat burning his skin through the thick protective gear. Danny's scream, it was like a knife stabbing into his heart, sharp and cruel. A faint Mike ... Then silence. He tried to dig, screaming Danny's name amidst the fire and blinding smoke and dust, but it was all in vain. Then another steel beam fell, hitting his left leg. Excruciating pain shot through his skull, and then darkness slowly enveloped him, carrying the final image of the greedy flames consuming everything. The memory stopped there. When he woke up, he was in the hospital. The pain, both physical and mental, remained forever. The siren of the ambulance carrying the stranger away to emergency care pulled Mike back to the present. His chest still ached, not just from the exertion, but from the freshly stirred memories, vivid and brutal. He had saved this man, but Danny and he couldn't. That horrific warehouse collapse not only claimed Danny and the unfortunate worker, but it also nearly took Mike's life. He was pulled from the rubble with severe burns, multiple broken ribs, and a crushed leg. Doctors fought for hours to save his life, followed by a series of surgeries to reconstruct his damaged body. But some scars never heal, neither on the skin nor in the soul. His left leg, despite numerous physical therapy sessions, still ached with a dull, persistent pain whenever the weather changed, or when he overexerted himself. His gait was no longer as swift and steady as it once was, occasionally marked by a barely perceptible limp, yet enough to remind him of the price of bravery. The mottled burn scars on his arm and part of his back, though faded over the years, remained tangible evidence of the life-and-death battle he had endured. He often wore long-sleeved shirts, even on hot summer days, not entirely out of self-consciousness, but because he didn't want to dredge up painful memories, didn't want curious eyes prying into a story he just wanted to forget. But those physical injuries, however painful, paled in comparison to the emotional wounds. The trauma of Danny's death, his final scream, the image of the fire consuming everything, haunted him relentlessly. He developed post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD. Many nights he would jolt awake, drenched in sweat, his heart racing, the image of the burning warehouse vivid in his mind. The sound of fire sirens, the smell of smoke, even a loud explosion from an action movie, could trigger a panic attack. Mike's voice, narrating, low, sad, slightly trembling. I tried. I really did. I saw a therapist, took my medication. I tried to focus on the good things, on my current life. But Danny, he was only 23. He had his whole future ahead of him. He trusted me. And I couldn't protect him. His voice choked. Sometimes I wonder if I deserved to survive, when others didn't. That crushing guilt was like a ghost, always lurking in Mike's mind. It made him withdraw from his old comrades, the friends with whom he had faced life and death. He couldn't bear the pity in their eyes, or worse, the unspoken judgment he imagined. He took early retirement, leaving the profession he once loved dearly, leaving the place that had given him purpose, but had also taken too much from him. He moved into a small apartment in a quieter neighborhood, trying to live a quiet life, working a mundane office job, just to keep his mind from having idle time to dwell on the past. Tonight's dinner at this fancy Italian restaurant was a rare occasion. An old friend from the fire department, the only one Mike still kept in regular contact with, had begged him to go out and get some air. He had hesitated, but finally agreed. And then that fateful fire erupted, right before his eyes. The firefighter's reflex had overcome the fear and the haunting memories. He had charged in, once again. But as he pulled the man out, as the explosion roared behind him, the horrific memories flooded back, stronger than ever. He tried to remain calm, but his hands were shaking uncontrollably. Could he ever truly escape the past? Or would he forever be imprisoned in that fateful night? The paramedics had arrived, quickly taking the victim from Mike. He stepped back, blending into the curious but safely distanced crowd. He felt exhausted, both physically and mentally. He just wanted to leave, to return to his familiar solitude. Several days passed since the terrifying night at the Italian restaurant. Mike had tried to push the images of the fire and the screams out of his mind, returning to the solitary, somewhat tedious rhythm of life he had grown accustomed to. He told himself it was just a spontaneous moment, a final reflex of a firefighter who had hung up his uniform. He didn't seek information about the man he had saved, nor did he expect a word of thanks. Attention, even positive, brought back things he wanted to forget. He only craved peace, a peace he had long lost. That afternoon, the pale autumn New York sunlight slanted through the window of Mike's small apartment. He was trying to concentrate on a detective novel, a way to escape reality. Suddenly, the doorbell rang, dry and unexpected, shattering the silence. Mike frowned. He hadn't ordered anything, nor did he have any appointments. Old friends from the department, except for Mark, who had invited him to dinner that night, rarely dropped by unannounced. He put the book down, feeling a little uneasy. He slowly walked to the door, looking through the peephole. 3 people stood outside. A middle-aged man in a charcoal gray suit, looking distinguished, his face vaguely familiar, but he couldn't place him immediately. Beside him was a woman with dark hair, elegantly dressed, but her eyes revealed fatigue and anxiety. Standing slightly behind them was a tall, burly man in a black suit, his sharp eyes scanning the surroundings. Clearly a bodyguard. A strange feeling stirred within Mike. He took a deep breath, then opened the door a crack, just enough to see them more clearly. "Excuse me, can I help you?" His voice was slightly guarded. The man in the gray suit smiled, a somewhat strange smile, but still trying to be friendly. "Excuse me, Is this the residence of Mr. Michael O'Connell? Yes, that's me. What is it? Thank goodness, the man said, his voice more relieved. I am Thomas Ashton, private secretary to Prime Minister Antoine Moreau, and this is Madame Elodie Moreau. He politely introduced the woman beside him. We were very much hoping to see you. Mike was stunned, his brain seemingly ceasing to function for a moment. Prime Minister? Madame Moreau? Antoine Moreau? That name. He had heard it somewhere in the news. And then, the image of the man with a soot-stained face, coughing violently, whom he had pulled from the inferno, flashed back. Though panicked and weak at the time, there was indeed a different aura, a charisma not of an ordinary person. But the prime minister of a country, he couldn't believe it. He had saved a prime minister? The door was unconsciously opened wider by Mike. Madame Moreau, without waiting for an invitation, stepped over the threshold. Her eyes, a melancholic blue, fixed on Mike. A look of scrutiny, gratitude, and deep emotion. Her gaze swept over his face, then lingered for a long time on his right arm, where the long-sleeved shirt couldn't completely hide the rugged contours of old scars. She gently brought a hand to her mouth, her shoulders trembling uncontrollably. It seemed she was trying to suppress an intense emotion that was about to burst forth. Mr. O'Connell, Madame Moreau began, her voice hoarse, trembling as if she were about to cry. We've been looking for you. My husband, he wanted to thank you personally. She took a deep breath, trying to regain her composure. You saved his life. If it weren't for you... She didn't finish the sentence, but the meaning was all too clear. At this moment, Prime Minister Antoine Moreau also entered the apartment. He looked much better than the image of a fire victim. His hair was combed, his suit neat, though his face still bore a few small scratches and a lingering weariness. He approached Mike, extending his hand. Mr. O'Connell, may I shake your hand? His voice was still a little hoarse from smoke inhalation, but warm and sincere. I am Antoine Moreau. I believe we met under rather unique circumstances. A faint smile flickered across his lips. Mike dazedly shook the Prime Minister's hand. Mr. Moreau's hand was warm and firm. Mr. Prime Minister, Madam Dot. Mike stammered, feeling completely flustered. He had never imagined standing in his small apartment, receiving such important guests. I just did what anyone would have done. Don't be so modest, Mr. O'Connell, Prime Minister Moreau said, his eyes looking directly into Mike's. A profound look, filled with infinite gratitude. Not everyone has the courage to charge into a burning building, risking their own life. My security staff told me you acted immediately, without a moment's hesitation. You snatched me from the jaws of death in the nick of time. Seconds after you pulled me out, that entire area exploded. He paused, his voice deepening. I owe you my life. My country owes you a debt of gratitude. Madame Moreau could no longer hold back. She stepped forward, grasping Mike's arm, her voice choked with emotion. Mr. O'Connell, we learned about you after Antoine regained consciousness and told us. We know you used to be a firefighter. We know what you've been through, about that accident, about your losses. She glanced down at Mike's left leg, where he had a habit of putting slightly more weight when standing for long, a sign only a keen observer would notice. Then she looked up again, at the faint scars on his wrist, exposed where his sleeve had ridden up when he rushed in to save her husband. When I heard that you, a man who had been so severely injured that you had to leave the job you loved, a man who carried the scars of previous rescues, did not hesitate to rush into danger again to save a stranger, my husband. Tears streamed down her pale cheeks. My heart felt as if someone was squeezing it. You have sacrificed so much, endured so much. How can we ever repay you enough? She burst into sobs, the suppressed gasps escaping uncontrollably. Mike stood without moving. Madame Moreau's emotion, the Prime Minister's sincere words, they were like powerful waves crashing against the icy wall he had built around his heart for so many years. He felt a lump in his throat. For the first time since Danny's death, he felt something other than pain and torment. A warmth, a recognition, a feeling that his actions, however small, had brought meaning. Mike's voice, narrating, trembling, interspersed with a soft sigh of relief and a hint of bewilderment. I, I really don't know what to say. I didn't think, please don't be so upset. He looked at Madame Moreau, who was being comforted by her husband. He felt a deep empathy for the fear she must have experienced. These scars, oh, they're a part of my life. Sometimes they're a burden, reminding me of failures, of those I couldn't save. He hesitated. But maybe they're also a reminder that, even after everything, I'm still here. And if I can do something, however small, to help someone, then I will. Prime Minister Moreau looked at Mike with undisguised respect. Mr. O'Connell, your actions were not small. You saved a father, a husband, a leader. You gave us a second chance. He squeezed Mike's hand again. We will never forget this. And we want to do something to express our gratitude, not just with words. The atmosphere in the small room was no longer one of formal distance, but had become warmer and more intimate. The pain of Mike's past seemed to soften, soothed by the sincerity and gratitude of the people he had unknowingly saved. Perhaps this was what he needed, a connection, a recognition that his sacrifices were not in vain. The darkness in his soul seemed to be pierced by an unexpected ray of light, a glimmer of new hope. The fateful encounter with Prime Minister Moreau and his wife changed Mike's life in a way he never expected. News of the silent hero's brave act that saved a foreign leader quickly spread, though initially kept discreet for security reasons. And then, Prime Minister Moreau himself, during an official return visit to New York a few months later, publicly shared the story and expressed his profound gratitude to Mike. Mike O'Connell, the retired firefighter who had lived in seclusion for years, trying to escape the ghosts of his past, suddenly became a symbol. He was honored by the New York City Fire Department in a formal ceremony. His former colleagues, whom he had avoided, now welcomed him with open arms, with undisguised admiration and pride. He saw Captain Miller, his old commander, now retired, with tears in his eyes as he shook Mike's hand. You've always been a true firefighter, Mike, he said, his voice full of emotion, whether you're in uniform or not. At the ceremony, standing on the podium to receive the Medal of Honor, Mike looked out at the crowded hall. He saw Prime Minister Moreau and Madame Moreau sitting in the front row, smiling encouragingly. For the first time in years, he didn't feel the weight of the past crushing his shoulders. He hadn't forgotten Danny, hadn't forgotten the losses, but now alongside the pain was a different feeling, a sense of purpose, of connection. Mike's voice, speaking at the ceremony, a little shaky at first, then stronger, interspersed with applause. Ladies and gentlemen, I truly don't know what to say. I never thought I'd be standing here. For many years I lived with the ghosts of my past, with the torment of what I couldn't do. He took a deep breath. But then something unexpected happened, and it reminded me that even when you think you've lost everything, even when you carry scars, you can still make a difference. You can still reach out and help someone else. I want to dedicate this honor to my fallen comrades, especially Danny, my brother, and to all firefighters who put their lives on the line every day to protect others. They are the true heroes. Resounding applause. And finally, Mike continued, his voice warmer, I want to say, never let the wounds of the past define you. Look for the light, however small, and let it guide you. Because sometimes, even in the darkest moments, we can find the strength to stand up and do the right thing. Thank you. Prolonged, warm applause. Mike O'Connell's story didn't just end with news reports or award ceremonies. It became a powerful source of inspiration. Articles and interviews, though Mike wasn't fond of them, spread his story to many, especially those struggling with PTSD, firefighters, police officers, and military personnel who had experienced trauma. They saw in Mike an example of resilience, of the ability to overcome adversity and find meaning in life again. Mike began to participate in support groups, sharing his story, not as a hero, but as a fellow traveler, someone who had been in the darkness and was trying to find his way to the light. He realized that helping others was also a way to heal his own wounds. The nightmares still came occasionally, but they were no longer as terrifying. The pain was still there, but it no longer consumed him. He kept in touch with Prime Minister Moreau. They became unlikely friends, bonded by a rare but meaningful event. Occasionally, they would exchange letters, and the Prime Minister always ended his with, "To my friend and savior." Mike O'Connell never returned to full-time firefighting. His leg injury and the limitations of age wouldn't allow it. But he found a new role, an inspirer, a reminder to us all that courage is not only shown by rushing into fire and bullets, but also by confronting the demons within one's own soul and conquering them. And so, the story of former firefighter Mike O'Connell, who stepped out of the darkness of his past into the light of compassion and sacrifice, continued to be told, not through sensational headlines, but through the positive changes in the lives of those he touched. He proved that even a small spark of kindness can illuminate an entire life, and sometimes the one who saves others is also saving himself. His life was a silent epic, a testament to the strength of the human spirit, showing that even after the most violent storms, the sun can shine again, warmer and brighter than ever before.